Okay. Thank you.
Lord, I ask that as we intentionally draw near to you these next few moments, that you may draw near to us and speak to our hearts in a fresh new way as we study your word. We also pray for Linda and for Diane.
Yeah, also pray for my friend,
And-
also prayed for my friend's brother, Tom, and his wife,
And Tom and his
and
wife.
Tom and Elise in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Tom and Elise, for all those who are ill, that God will bring
Thank you.
healing and strength in body, mind, and spirit. Amen.
Amen.
And we have someone new. Sorry, who's Karen?
Oh, well, this is Karen. She's
Hi,
new
Karen.
to
Karen.
to the Zoom, but Karen normally attends the in-person class on Wednesday mornings, but she wasn't able to make it this morning. That's why she's here.
Oh,
So
welcome.
Karen, wonderful.
Karen Wagner.
You see how committed she is. She missed class this morning, but she's here this evening. So
Hi, Karen.
Hi,
Yes.
I just hit town, so I was like,
Oh,
yeah, I came in.
Hello.
Nice to see you, Karen. Nice to see you.
Thanks for
Okay.
having me.
You are welcome, dear. You are welcome. All right. So did anyone read all the chapters of First Samuel?
No.
Yeah.
Nobody did? Jeez.
I
No.
did.
I read half. I read
I am
1
crushed.
through 16, correct, and I read part of 19.
I am
Thanks, Karen.
crushed.
So what are we on?
It's
1
hard to
Samuel what?
read.
Oh, okay. Hold on.
Well, I read
You're
part
fir-
of them.
Okay. Did everybody read like the first few chapters?
Yes. It's
Okay,
part of them.
all right.
Part
So-
of them.
Okay, so we will not read those since you have read those. We'll just read a couple of chapters. So it would have been good. Let me see if I can do that.
It was a
because-
lot.
Hmm?
It
It
is
was
a lot. It is.
Oh, it was a lot. I know. That's why I sent it to you the
That's
day
not
after the
easy.
I
last
didn't read them
class.
all.
That's why I sent it to you the day after the last class.
Need
Because I
the
knew it was
condensed version. So
because I knew it was going to be a lot. But you see, that's why Samuel has 2 books named after him.
One Hannah's View and the other, right? This one
Uh,
is Hannah's View. Is that what my Bible says? It calls
Hmm?
Samuel
Hannah's
Hannah's
Vow.
View.
I have Hannah's vow instead.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Sounds a
You're
little
right.
bit
Hannah's Vow. I don't know why I said view. Yes,
Let's
you're correct.
see.
Anyway, so Samuel must.
I'm trying to see. Okay, I'm trying to see if we should. I'm trying to see this morning. All right, let us read.
Need a notepad.
I'm presuming that you have read most of the chapters, the first set of chapters. So let us read chapters. And did everyone read chapter 10?
No.
Okay.
I believe I did.
George is it. Okay.
George is it. All right, let's read chapter 10.
I just got to read chapter 10. I just have to get to it.
Let's see, chapter 10 and 11 and 12.
Okay, so 10, 11, and 12.
Yeah, I think that's what we'll do. Let's just do those 3
Yes.
chapters. Who wants to read? Let me see. Chapter 10 had how many folks we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, good. Who wants to read chapter? How many verses in chapter 10? There are 27.
It's 16.
So chapter 10, who wants to read verses 1 to 14? And then I see Marilyn's hand, 1 to 14. And then I see Bryce's hand, which will be 15 to the end. Chapter 11, I see Dorothy's hand. You will read 1 to 12. Who wants to read 13 to the end?
I will.
I see Susan's hand.
It's
And
short.
then,
I'm cold.
yeah, and then chapter 13
Paper.
has 22 verses. Wait a minute, what did I say just now? Chapter 10, no, what am I doing? Sorry. Chapter 10 has 27 verses, so there's 1 to 14 and the rest. Chapter 11 has, chapter 11 only has 15 verses.
chapter 11.
Who was going to read chapter 11?
I?
Marilyn, Marilyn,
I
are
think
you
it's
reading?
Dorothy. No, I thought you said
First.
Dorothy, you can read chapter 11. That's very short.
But I only have 11 verses. What do you, how many
Yeah.
verses?
You have 15 verses.
15 verses.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. My Bible puts the subtitles. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
You're right. Got it
And
now.
then chapter 12, who wants to read verses 1 to 12? I saw, it was Marilyn's hand, I think. Marilyn, was that your hand? I think I saw Marilyn. Marilyn, are you reading?
You put me first.
I put you first.
Doesn't
So
it?
you're first, Bryce is second, Dorothy is third. Oh, it's Susan. Susan, can you read verses third? You will read, wait a minute, hold on. I'm mixing myself up here. Chapter 12, you will read, Susan, verses 1 to 13. And I saw Karen's hand. Karen, you will read 14 to the end of chapter 12. Okay? So read in chapter 10, 11, and 12. Marilyn is first. She will read from verse 1 to 14. And Bryce will read 15 to the end. Dorothy, you will read chapter 11. And Susan, you will read chapter 12, verses 1 to 13. Karen, you will read 14 to the end. All right. Please start, Marilyn.
Then Samuel took a flask of oil and poured it on Saul's head and kissed him, saying, "Has not the Lord anointed you leader over his inheritance? When you leave me today, you will meet 2 men near Rachel's tomb at Zelzah on the border of Benjamin, and they will say to you, 'The donkeys you set out to look for have been found.' And now your father has stopped thinking about them and is worried about you. He is asking, 'What shall I do about my son?' Then you will go on from there until you reach the great tree of Tabor. 3 men are going up to God at Bethel and will meet you there. One will be carrying 3 young goats, another 3 loaves of bread, and another a skin of wine. They will greet you and offer you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from them. After that, you will go to Gilboa of God, where there is a Philistine outpost. As you approach the town, you will meet a procession of prophets coming down from the high place with lyres, tambourines, flutes, and harps being played before them, and they will be prophesied. The Spirit of the Lord will come upon you in power, and you will prophesy with them, and you will be changed into a different person. Once these signs are fulfilled, do whatever your hand finds to do, for God is with you. Go ahead of me to Gilgal. I will surely come down to you to sacrifice burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. But you must wait 7 days until I come to you and tell you what to do." Excuse me. As Saul turned to leave Samuel, God changed Saul's heart, and all these signs were fulfilled that day. When they arrived at Gilboa, a procession of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came upon him in power, and he joined in their prophesying. When all those who had formerly known him saw him prophesying with the prophets, they asked each other, "What is this that has happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets?" A man who lived there answered, "And who is their father?" So it became a saying, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" After Saul stopped prophesying, he went to the high place. Now Saul's uncle asked him and his servant, "Where have you been?" "Looking for the donkeys," he said. But when he saw they were not to be found, we went to Samuel.
Thank you, Marilyn. Continue, Bryce.
Okay. "Tell me," Saul uncle asked, "what did Samuel say to you?" Saul told him, "He assured us the donkeys have been found." However, Saul did not tell him what Samuel had said about the matter of kingship. Samuel summoned the people to the Lord at Mizpah and said to the Israelites, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought Israel out of Egypt, and I rescued you from the power of the Egyptians in all the kingdoms that were oppressing you. But today you have rejected your God, who has saved you from all your troubles and afflictions. You said to him, you must set a king over us. Now therefore present yourselves before the Lord by your tribes and your clans. Samuel had all the tribes of Israel come forward. At the tribe of Benjamin was selected. Then he had the tribe of Benjamin come forward by its clans, and the Menarite clans was selected. Finally, Saul, son of Kish, was selected. But when they searched for him, they could not find him. They again inquired of the Lord, has the man come here yet? The Lord replied, there he is hidden among the supplies. They ran and got him from there, where he stood among the people. He stood a head taller than anyone else. Samuel said to all the people, do you see the one the Lord has chosen? There is no one like him among the entire population. And all the people shouted, long live the king! Samuel proclaimed to the people the rights of the kingship. He wrote them on a scroll. When he placed in the presence of the Lord, then Samuel sent all the people home. Saul also went to his home in Gilboa, and brave men whose heart God had touched went with him. But some wicked men said, how can this guy save us? They despised him and did not bring him a gift, but Saul said nothing.
Thank you. Dorothy.
Nahash the Ammonite came up and laid siege to Jabesh Gilead. All the men of Jabesh said to him, make a treaty with us, and we will serve you. Nahash and the Ammonite replied, I'll make one with you on this condition, that I gouge out everyone's right eye and humiliate all Israel. Don't do anything to us for 7 days, the elders of Jabesh said to him, and let us send messengers throughout the territory of Israel. If no one serves us, we will surrender to you. When the messengers came to Gibeah, Saul's hometown, and told the terms to the people, all wept aloud. Just then Saul was coming in from the field behind his oxen. What's the matter with the people? Why are they weeping? Saul inquired, and they replied to him the words of the men from Jabesh. When Saul heard these words, the Spirit of God suddenly came powerfully upon him, and his anger burned furiously. He took a team of oxen, cut them in pieces, and sent them throughout the territory of Israel by messengers who said, this is what we will do to the ox of anyone who doesn't march behind Saul and Samuel. As a result, the terror of the Lord fell on the people, and they went out united. Saul counted them at Bezek. There were 300,000 Israelites and 30,000 men from Judah. He told the messengers who had come, tell this to the men of Israel, Gilead, deliverance will be yours tomorrow by the time the sun is hot. So the messenger told the men of Jabesh, and they replied. Then the men of Jabesh said to Nahash, tomorrow we will come out, and you can do whatever you want to us. The next day, Saul organized the troops into 3 divisions. During the morning watch, they invaded the Ammonite camp and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. They were survivors, but they were so scattered that no 2 of them were left together. Afterwards, the people said to Samuel, who said that Saul should not reign over us? Give us those men so we can kill them. But Saul ordered, no one will be executed this day, for today the Lord has provided the deliverance in Israel. And Samuel said to the people, come, let's go to Gilgal. We can renew the kingship there. So all the people went to Gilgal, and there in the Lord's presence, they made Saul king. There they sacrificed fellowship offerings in the Lord's presence, and Saul and all the men of Israel rejoiced greatly.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is before Saul actually
Susan.
fails.
Susan, go ahead.
Okay. Samuel said to Israel, I have listened to everything you said to me and have set a king over you. Now you have a king as your leader. As for me, I am old and gray, and my sons are here with you. I have been your leader from youth until this day. Here I stand, testify against me in the presence of the Lord. And he anointed, whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these, I will make it right. You have not cheated or oppressed us, they replied. You have not taken anything from one's hand. Samuel said to them, the Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed is witness this day, and that you have not found anything in my hand. He is witness, they said. Then Samuel said to the people, it is the Lord who anointed Moses and Aaron and brought your ancestors up out of Egypt. Now then, stand here, because I am going to confront you with evidence before the Lord as all righteous acts performed by the Lord for you and your ancestors. After Jacob entered Egypt, they cried to the Lord for help, and the Lord sent Moses and Aaron, who brought their ancestors out of Egypt and settled them in this place. But they forgot the Lord their God, so he sold them into the hand of Sisera, the commander of the army of Hazar, and into the hands of the Philistines and the king of Moab, who fought against them. They cried out to the Lord and said, you have sinned. We have forsaken the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. But now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we will serve you. Then the Lord sent Jerubbaal. I gotta turn the page, I got caught. Stuck. Barak and Jephthah and Samuel, and he delivered you from the hands of your enemies all around you, so that you lived in safety. Oh, one more. But you saw that Nahash, king of the Ammonites, was moving against you. You said to me, no, we want a king to rule over us, even though the Lord your God was your king. Now here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set you a king over you.
Thank you. Karen.
Okay. And if you will fear the Lord and serve him and listen to his voice and not rebel against the commandment of the Lord, and if both you and the king who reigns over you will follow the Lord your God, it will be well. But if you will not listen to the voice of the Lord, but rebel against the commandments of the Lord, then the hand of the Lord will be against you and your king. Now therefore stand still and see this great thing which the Lord will do before your eyes. Is it not wheat harvest today? I will call upon the Lord that he may send thunder and rain, and you shall know and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord in asking for yourselves a king. So Samuel called upon the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. And all the people said to Samuel, pray for your servants to the Lord your God, that we may not die, for we have added to all our sins this evil, to ask for ourselves a king. And Samuel said to the people, fear not, you have done all this evil, yet do not turn aside from following the Lord, but serve the Lord with all your heart, and do not turn aside after vain things which cannot profit or save, for they are vain. For the Lord will not cast away his people for his great name's sake, because it has pleased the Lord to make you a people for himself. Moreover, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against the Lord by ceasing to pray for you, and I will instruct you in the good and the right way. Only fear the Lord and serve him faithfully with all your heart, for consider what great things he has done for you. But if you still do wickedly, you shall be swept away, both you and your king.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Karen.
Mhm.
Thank you, everyone. All right. Now I started there, or we read there, because I'm presuming that you read before there. So
Have we
so
done
let's,
Have we done
let's
1 Samuel 13 yet, or no?
no, we have not. We're not doing that. No. All right.
So we're skipping that.
Yes. All right. So first thing is that the name Samuel means God hears, or God has heard, or sometimes it's just referred to as the name of God. So I just wanted to share that with you. Samuel's parents were two people called Elkanah and Hannah. They were
Yeah, didn't
devout.
Elkanah
Hold on, Bryce. Hold on,
get
hold on, Bryce. Hold on.
Mhm.
Elkanah and Hannah were a devout couple. They lived in the hill country of Ephraim.
They can't hear you.
You cannot hear me?
I can.
I hear you.
Yeah, we hear you.
So you can't hear me, Bryce? Oh, he's frozen. That's
Oh,
why
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
here he is. He's back now.
Bryce, your internet.
Can you hear
might
me?
be a
Can you
little
hear me now,
unstable.
Bryce?
Yes, I can hear you now.
that's the
Okay,
internet,
I
yeah.
think you lost connection. You froze
Yeah.
on the screen.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I don't know
No,
how
that's
that
all right.
happened.
No, that's all right. That's
It's
all
not my
right.
fault.
No, that's all right. um, uh, and you would find that Hannah had long been barren or childless, and she is one of those many women, or at least company of women who have been childless for a while. Last week we looked at Samson, and his mother was also in a similar situation. And there are many others in the Bible. Now, while she made a pilgrimage to a shrine in Shiloh, she promised the Lord if he was to give her a son, she will consecrate him to the service of God. Now, Hannah, the name Hannah means grace, and she was praying with such emotion to Eli, as we will see in chapter 1, is that Eli accused her of being drunk.
Yeah, but Eli actually made her drunk anyway. So.
He accused her of being, speaking as if she was a drunken person. And
It was the
her
other way around.
response to him was, "No, I have not been drinking wine or beer. I'm just pouring my soul out to the Lord." And so we find that in the first chapter of 1 Samuel. Now, Elkanah means God has possessed, or God has taken possession. And he is seen to be from an impressive family history, lineage, being from the Levites and the Zuphites and the Ephraimites. And Elkanah, he had two wives, Peninnah, which means pearl or precious stone. And as we heard before, he had Hannah. Now, Peninnah had sons and daughters for Elkanah. However, Hannah was unable to produce an offspring. And even although she was unable to produce offspring, Elkanah loved Hannah more than he loved Peninnah. And that made Peninnah very jealous. Even although you would thought, well, I've produced you a lot of sons, a lot of kids, a lot of heirs, yet you still love her more than you love me, and who is unable to produce. And obviously it shows that competitive nature and jealousy toward Hannah. And as a result, once we read chapter 1, you will find that Peninnah treated Hannah with great contempt, causing Hannah deep anguish and pain. It is only after persistent prayer by Anna and her promise that she will give up her child to God's service that she conceived a son. She named him Samuel. He is seen as the one of the last of the judges as he transitioned the leadership of Israel from the judges to monarchy. So and he will be the one who will anoint the kings, two kings, Saul and then David.
Right.
Now, if you read chapter 2, it is interesting that we read in chapter 2, verse 5. In chapter 2, verse 5, Mary in her prayer or her song, whichever you want to prefer to call it, she says, those who were full hired themselves out for food, but those who were hungry are hungry no more. She who was barren has borne 7 children, but she who has had many sons pine away. And obviously here she's referring to herself and to Peninnah. And but when we look at verse 21, I think it is, yes, verse 21 of the same chapter 2, it reads, and the Lord was gracious to Hannah. She gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. And well, let me should read from verse 20 where it says, Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, saying, may the Lord give you children by this woman to take the place of the one she prayed for and gave to the Lord. And then she got 3 sons and excuse me, and 2 daughters. Now you might wonder, well, 3 and 2 is 5, and Samuel makes 6. How come in the song she said 7? And it goes back to that same number again of the wholeness, the completeness of the number 7. And there's always this discrepancy sometimes if you were to read different sources, that some people think that Hannah had 5 children, some think she had 6 children, some think she had 7 children. I mean, I think she had 6 children from the point of view that the 7 that she mentions, I think is just that is, again, the complete number where God has given her these number of children and her childbearing is complete or has been completed. Some have said that when they mentioned 3 sons and 2 daughters, that included Samuel. I don't think it did. I think it was those who followed Samuel, because Samuel, although she gave birth to Samuel, Samuel was seen as one who was dedicated to the Lord and belonged to the Lord, and that is how it would have been perceived in those days. So it appears that she would have had a total of 6 children. The other thing we see here, a similarity to Samson, is that she prayed that Samson is a Nazirite. And we know, sorry, that Samuel is a Nazirite. And last week, we heard that Samson was also a Nazirite. And you will see here in chapter 1, let me see if I can find it for you quickly. Let's see. Can anybody spot it quickly or quicker than I can?
Okay.
Where she,
Let's
see
I
here.
think when she promised the Lord that if he gave her a son, no razor would come upon his head.
Oh yes, that's the verse I'm looking for. Correct.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for too.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the
you said
verse.
that, but where is that? Oh, it's 'cause
Yes, it is
well,
in
I didn't
chapter
want to post
1,
either.
and I think it's close to the very beginning as
11.
well.
It's
Verse
11.
Making
Verse
it
11.
loud.
Because mine is 11. Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
verse 11.
Yeah.
And she made a vow saying, Lord
Yes.
Almighty, if
Mhm.
you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life, and no razor will ever be used on his head. The whole Nazirite. Thank you, Juanita, and thank you. Who was it that said it? Karen, thank you. Again, you see that whole vow that comes from Hannah, making her son a Nazirite, and to also bring him up in the Lord. Now, you will also realize that she kept her promise. She brought the toddler to Shiloh after he was weaned. She formally dedicated him to God and left him there to be raised by Eli the priest. And we see in verses 27 and 28 at the end, verse 28. So now I give him to the Lord, for his whole life he will be given over to the Lord, and he worshiped the Lord there. So then we find then when we get into chapter 2, we see Hannah's prayer of thanksgiving, where she praised God's care for weak and hurting people, saying there is no holy one like the Lord, no one besides you. And when you look at her prayer, then you look at her song, who does it remind you of?
Mary.
Mary.
Mary. It reminds you of Mary. So you can tell that Mary knows Hannah's song very well, and she did a similar thing to Hannah. You know, the Magnificat, the song of Mary begins, my soul rejoices in the greatness of the Lord, or rejoices in the Lord. And Hannah's own said, my heart rejoices in the Lord. It starts off in that way, and you will see it goes through Hannah's song. And it talks about strength, which Mary's own talks about, and it talks about Most High, which Mary's own talks about. So you can see that Mary draws from Hannah's prayer. So you will find that Hannah was always seen as a woman of great faith, of deep faith, and she was also honorable as Samuel's mother, although obviously Eli raised him. One of the things to also mention is that in 1 Samuel, Samuel is seen as an Ephraimite. However, if you were to read 1 Chronicles chapter 6, it is implied that he was also he was a Levite, and it is quite possible that that was so because of his early attachment to the tabernacle, as well as his inheritance, where he was a descendant of Levi's son Konaph. And as we know, he used to wear a linen ephod, which was worn by priests, which is like a priestly apron. And even when his family, when Hannah and Elkanah visited Shiloh every year for their family's annual sacrifice, Hannah used to bring him a new robe. So obviously he continued to have clothes from her. And then what we find is that normally in those days, when we get to verse 12 of chapter 2, in those days, it was almost like nepotism. The high priest, the priests would be succeeded by his priestly sons. And Eli had two. He had Hophni and he had Phinehas. And these were Eli's priestly sons. They were also priests. However, they violated their office, and they did this, and if you read verses from verse 12 and on, by demanding that worshipers give them the best meat, which ought to be being offered as sacrifices. And they were very demanding in it. They were very demanding in it. If you read from verse 15 of chapter 2, but even before the fat was burned, the priest's servants would come and say to the people who were sacrificing, give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw. If the person said to him, let the fat be burned first, and then take whatever you want, the servant would answer, no, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force. So you can imagine these are the servants kind of the priests, and there was a particular way that the offering was to be done, then to be given, and they're demanding the best. They want the best, and they want to do it themselves before they don't want what the sacrifices that people are making. And here you find then that even though Eli would warn them that the sins, that they're directly sinning against the Lord, they still continue to abuse their privileges. And because they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. I was looking to see if you look at verse 22 and following. Now Eli who was very old, heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel, and how they slept with the women who served at the entrance of the tent of meeting. So he said to them, "Why do you do such things? I hear from all the people about these wicked deeds of yours. No, my sons, the report I hear spreading among the Lord's people is not good. If one person sins against another, God may mediate for the offender. But if anyone sins against the Lord, who will intercede for them? His sons, however, did not listen to their father's rebuke, for it was the Lord's will to put them to death." So you find here is that you're going to have this dichotomy between Eli's sons, who should really be rightfully continue to be priests after Eli, and you have Samuel, where you find in verse 18 that he was ministering before the Lord. He was wearing a linen ephod, just like a priest would. And then you see at verse 26, and the boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. So you see here, Eli's sons are misbehaving, whereas Samuel is continued to go in the right direction in being faithful to God. And then when we get into, and then as we come down into the last part of chapter 2, we will find that the Lord is very much going to send a man of God, a man from him, to prophesy against Eli and his household, and how that the sons will both die on the same day, and that he will raise up another person to be priest who will do according to what is in his heart and his mind. And so the house of Eli is going to be destroyed as a result of the sins of the sins they committed.
So you're saying it's like a
go ahead, Bryce.
So you're saying it's like a spoiler alert that Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, get killed, and also Eli dies himself as well too.
Yes,
but
he will.
So it's like sort of like a curse.
Well, you may call it
and a tragedy in the family. So it's sort of like a tragedy in the family, even like
Correct.
Eli's first wife dies as well too. It's like a tragedy in the family because she gets punished as well too.
Yes.
But I don't get it. Why would God get angry at his first wife Peninnah, and why would he get angry at Phinehas and Hophni and Phinehas and even Eli as well too? Why would God get angry?
But God wasn't angry with Peninnah. I don't think God was angry with Peninnah. I think, but in terms of the two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, you will find that they were disobedient. They were not carrying out.
Why were they disobedient? I mean, is there a reason why?
Because they're human beings and they refuse to be faithful to God. I mean, just like anybody disobey God. I mean,
yeah, well, people do disobey gods. I mean, like even throughout the news as well too, in real life.
Yes.
I mean, God gave us free will, but yet people are making bad decisions even throughout today.
Yes.
There is evil no matter where you go.
I had another question to ponder.
Go ahead,
Dorothy.
Dorothy.
I don't really want you to
Thank
answer.
you, Bryce. Go ahead, Dorothy.
I'm sorry. It's just something I'm thinking. again, in the Bible, we have the attribution of a child being bad, paying for the sins of their father. They were paying for the sins of Eli.
Not in this case.
No?
No, they're paying for their own sins.
So they're paying for their own sins.
They're
you're saying?
paying for their own sins in this case. They're the ones.
So they're not paying
um,
for their dad's sins. You're saying.
They're not? Okay,
they're-
I thought I read that or saw that. Okay.
No, no. As far as I can remember, they are not. The only problem with Eli is that Eli, although he spoke with them about it, his sons about it, to stop what they were doing, he was not more forceful and firm in it. But his sons were the ones who were taking the best of the offering. His sons were the ones who were sleeping with women, as we will probably say, left, right, and center. This was their doing, and therefore God did not wish to have that kind of a priestly a priesthood continuing after Eli. And you also have to remember that when Eli died, although when he heard the news that the sons had died and what had happened with the ark and so forth, and he fell over and died, he was already 98 at the time when he did. So, but
we really don't know that he died at the age of 98. We really don't know.
Well, we could only go on what it says here, and that's what it says here in the Bible. That's all we have.
Right,
Yeah,
but we
that's
don't
all.
really know for a fact.
So that's all we can say.
Right, but what you're saying is we don't really know for a fact.
Well, I mean,
He could have not.
if you look at the Bible, you might say, I could say to you, you don't know anything for a fact.
Right.
Okay, if you get what I'm saying, if you're going to go down that road, I will hasten that we shouldn't go down that road in that regard. Now, when we get to chapter 3, it's a familiar chapter to everyone. Everyone knows about the call of Samuel, and how Samuel is in the next room from Eli, and he hears this voice. He does not know who the voice is. He thinks it's Eli's voice.
That's God's voice.
And so Samuel goes over to Eli, and he says, "Did you call me?" And Eli sends him back to bed. And it happens again a second time. It happens again a third time. And it's on that third time that Eli says to him, the next time it happens, say to the person that is speaking to you, "Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening," because Eli realized that it was Samuel that he was calling. It is interesting how in this story in chapter 3, it reads that again the Lord called Samuel, and Samuel got up and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, you called me." And then in verse 8 it says, "A third time the Lord called Samuel," and it only mentions Samuel's name once. However, in verse 10, when he goes the fourth time and the Lord calls him, the Lord came and stood there, calling as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And as I said to the class, when you see the name repeated, like there's repetition of Abraham, there's repetition of Moses, there's repetition of other names.
Isaac, Jacob,
Mary was used. Where when God calls your name twice, so Pam, if you hear him saying Pamela, that means he has something very serious
Better
to say.
listen.
You better listen. You better listen. So if you hear him telling you, he may not say Pam, he may say Pamela. You better listen. That is
Well,
that
I've
is
never seen God that
that-
called me, however.
that is important, and you see, obviously, it was important because God had something to say to Samuel at that point, and we know that Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Some wonder, well, why didn't he say the same thing that Eli said? Eli said, "Speak, Lord," and he just said, "Speak," and there could be a number of reasons why. Maybe he still wasn't sure it was the Lord. Maybe it was a translation problem where the word Lord could have been left out. We don't really know. But the fact is that he listened to the Lord. And the Lord tells him, and remember, he was still a youth. He was still a boy, kind of. But the Lord tells him that I am going to carry out that Eli's family will not carry on the priesthood. He says, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle. At that time, I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I will judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them." That was Eli's
Sins of your father. Sorry.
thing. That was what, but I don't think it was the sins of the father. I don't agree with that in that way,
Okay.
because I think what God is saying here is that his son committed sins and he really did not rein them in. It wasn't that they were the father's sins, they were the children's sins, but Eli did not rein them in. And for that, he too will suffer some kind of fate for it, which he does. And so it says, "For I told him that I will judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore, I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering." So although it wasn't directly Eli's sins, it was those of his children, he still suffered because he had a responsibility and he did not live up to that responsibility that was expected of him. And so you find then that the next morning when Samuel gets up and Eli gets up, Eli is anxious. What did God say to you? He wants to know what God said to him. And you see in verse 17, "What was it he said to you?" Eli asks. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." So even although Samuel tells him what the Lord says, Eli is still faithful in terms of saying, "Let God's will be done." And Eli himself, goes out and he publicizes it to the whole populace that this is what was going to happen and that God had appointed Samuel to be a prophet of the Lord. And that news spread everywhere. So it is important to note that. Let me see, where am I? I want to. And then obviously you see in chapter 4 where there is a battle with the Philistines, between the Israelites and the Philistines, or the Philistines, depending on how you pronounce the word. And the two sons of Eli are killed. The Ark of the Covenant
Was stolen.
Well, it wasn't stolen, but taken. And which means that obviously the Philistines defeated the Israelites. And when Eli heard about the death of his two sons and that the ark was captured, he was sitting on a chair by the side of the road, and then he went backward, broke his neck, and died. And you see there in verse 15, he was 98 years old, and whose eyes had failed. That's when he died. And you see that in verse 18. When he mentioned the ark of God, Eli fell backward off his chair by the side of the gate. His neck was broken and he died, for he was an old man and he was heavy. He had led Israel 40 years. And so you see here now it's that Samuel now is going to take prominence in the book, in the history of Israel. You're going to find that it's interesting if you read chapter 5 and following, in the ark. They started when the ark went into the temple of the Philistines, and the next morning they came, and they saw the god Dagon fallen on the ground on his face, and they picked him up, put him back in place, and the next morning he had fallen again on his face, and this time now his head and his hands were broken. And when they realized that, they got suspicious and they moved the Ark of the Covenant somewhere else. And as soon as they started moving the Ark, people in their area started dying. And that made the Philistines, very frightened, because then they realized, hey, this Ark that we have taken is going to lead to our downfall. And so much so that when folks started to hear that it was coming, they wanted to have nothing to do with the ark in their possession, in their village, in their community. They were afraid to do this, which caused people to say, you need to send the ark back where it came from if you want to live. If not, we will all be wiped out, and the ark will still be there. And I even said to the group this morning, it's a good thing they didn't destroy the ark. They probably would all be dead one time. Zoom, the whole nation would have been wiped out at one time if they had ever destroyed the ark. So it shows you the power of that. So they said they will return the ark. They went to the priests, and those kinds of folks to find out what they should do. They told them what to do: return the ark. If it goes up to Beth Shemesh, and it keeps going, it means that what was taking place, what was happening to them, was from God. If it went a different direction, then it was not from God, and it went right up, and they knew it was from God. And so that's how they got the ark out of their possession, and people were still able to stay alive as a result. Now, the next major thing that we come to is now the whole notion of the people asking for a king. And here you see again, Samuel had sons, and he appointed his sons as Israel leaders. There were two of them, Joel and Abijah, and yet the sons was nothing like the father. The sons were nothing like the father. They did not follow his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain and accepting bribes and perverting justice. So you see this whole similar thing to Eli's sons. Eli's sons were not like him. Now you find Samuel's sons are not like him. And it caused the people, if you're looking at chapter 8, it caused the people, you saw in verse 4, it caused the people to come to Samuel. It says here, so all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "You are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us." Now, if it had stopped there, it would have been sounding a bit legit. Yeah, you got some bad sons. We don't want to have bad rulers ruling us. Let's get a king. And it would have been. However, they didn't stop there. They continue, such as all the other nations have. And from the time Samuel hears that, and God too hears that, they see that as the reason why they want a king, so that they could be like other people. Because when you read chapter 8 and verse 6, it continues, but when they said, "Give us a king to lead us," this displeased Samuel. So he prayed to the Lord, and the Lord told him, "Listen to all that the people are saying to you. It is not you they had rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." So it is God feels rejected by them, because all along God was their king. They didn't have any earthly king, but now they want to be like the other people. So they don't want to have God as their king. They want to have their own, like the other folks who they think, well, at least we could see our king and he's fighting on our behalf and we can see that, as opposed to an invisible king who yet still, in spite of all that God has been doing for them since the time they left Egypt until now, they still don't get the picture. They still don't see it.
I have a question.
Yes, Juanita.
Isn't so much about the story itself. It's just that reading it, I found myself asking myself something. When it said Samuel's sons, right? I was wondering what Samuel's mother gave him to the Lord, and he grew up in the temples. What was his role there? Eli was the priest. What was Samuel's role then?
An interesting question. The church has always felt that Samuel was more or less, at least in his earlier years, more like how you have acolytes ministering at the altar. That he was, if you really talk about an acolyte or an altar server, they're seen as Samuel is seen as their ancestor. They're the descendants of Samuel, in the sense of the fact that he ministered at the altar, he ministered in the sanctuary with Eli the priest, just like how acolytes and altar servers minister at the altar with the priest. That is how he was. At the same time, and then I'll tell you honestly, here yours truly is a perfect example. Many people who serve at the altar become priests. So and here you see, even although Samuel is not called a priest in the Bible, he performed priestly duties because he used to officiate at the worship oh, it wouldn't come to my mind. It will come back to me. But he performed priestly functions. So Samuel, I will say that Samuel's role was serving at the altar with the priests until he himself gotten older and more or less became almost like a priest, for lack of a better word.
Okay, why I ask that is you came along thinking you were here about the priests and the Levites, right?
Correct.
You got the impression that the Levites lived or worked at the temple or whatever.
Correct.
Right. So when it said to me Samuel's sons, I was like, how did Samuel get sons? If his mother gave him to the Lord from the time he was a toddler, spent his whole life at the temple, then at some point he moved out to the temple, then where he could go and get married. You're
taking it too literally. You're thinking that he's a Roman Catholic priest. He's not a Roman Catholic priest. Priests in those days had children. Priests had children.
Right. That's why I was wondering.
Because Eli had children, and Eli was a priest. Priests had children. So he's not a Roman priest. And yes, and as you realize, it doesn't tell you much about a part is missing from his life. It doesn't go straight. Just like how we have a part missing from Jesus's life. We don't know about Jesus after he was 12 years old till we hear he was being baptized at the age of 30, around the age of 30.
Yeah.
It's the same way with Samuel as well. Yes.
Yeah, because when I read it, so here am I going all through Google saying, looking for the name of Samuel's wife, and I ain't seeing it at all anywhere. Nobody seems to know, right? So it just raised some questions in my mind. But yes, as you said, Eli had sons, so priests then have families.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, I'll tell you this too. I mean, George can correct me if I'm wrong, but popes had children too at one time until that change. And if you really want to go back and to dig up where it started, where the Roman Church sees Peter as the first pope, and Jesus speaks about Peter's mother-in-law who was sick, which means that Peter had a wife. So it is not to say that priests could not have a family. In the biblical days, they did. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions before we go
Nope.
on?
Nope.
Okay. Where am I? Okay. So you see here then that one of the things that Samuel tried to tell the folks as well after they wanted a king, you see that Samuel tells them, you want a king, but there are certain consequences of having a king. And some of those consequences include the king can want the best land, they can want the best animals, they can want to make soldiers and servants of the most able young people. They're going to tax you heavily. You're going to have a lot of burdens. You're going to be a little better off than the slaves to the king. All these kinds of things are going to happen, and Samuel, you can tell, is using these things as a deterrent. And if you read from chapter 8, verse 10 and following, you see Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "This is what the king who will reign over you will claim as his rights." And he goes on to talk about what some of these things are. He will take your sons and make them serve with his chariots and horses, and they will run in front of his chariots. Some he will assign to be commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and others to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and still others to make weapons for war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive groves and give them to his attendants. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vintage and give it to his officials and attendants. Your male and female servants and the best of your cattle and donkeys will be taken for his own use. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his slaves. When that day comes, you will cry out for relief from the king you have chosen, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. And so you see, Samuel is telling them, this is what you get when you get a king. And if you want to have a king, go right ahead. But when you come crying to the Lord that, oh Lord, we didn't know it was going to be like this, the Lord will be silent. That is what Samuel is trying to portray here. But yet you find is that if you read verse 19 of chapter 8, the people still refuse to listen to Samuel. No, they said, we want a king over us. Then we will be like all the other nations. And there you have it. They will be like all the other nations. That's what they want. With a king to lead us and to go out before us and fight our battles.
Right.
That's what they wanted. And so in verse 21, when Samuel heard all that the people said, he repeated it before the Lord. The Lord answered, listen to them and give them a king. Then Samuel said to the Israelites, everyone go back to your own town. So you hear now, they are persistent in their demand in having a king to govern them and to lead them in battle. And so Samuel finally agrees, obviously, because the Lord told him to, and he sent them back to their homes. But yet all of the warning that he gave them I guess it might have gone through one ear and out through the next, because it didn't phase all this consequences that Samuel gave, still did not phase them. So then we come to Samuel being Saul being anointed as king. We are told that he's the son of Kish. He's a Benjaminite. He is he was out. He was a handsome man. He was taller. I guess everybody was by his shoulder, and he's a head taller than everybody else. And he was out looking for the lost donkeys belonging to his father when he encountered Samuel. And he goes with Samuel, and Samuel have a dinner for him, and the next thing we knew is that Saul saw himself as one of as Paul will call it, the least of the apostles, because he saw his clan, his tribe, which was Benjamin, named after Benjamin, who was the very last child of Jacob. So, you know, as I said to the others this morning, he was from the baby tribe. And so, he did not see himself. He felt that you get the sense that he felt totally unprepared for being king. And the thing about it is, you know, as he looked for his animals, Samuel was told by God, "This is the man who I want to become king." And so when Saul, I keep saying Saul, Samuel put Samuel at the head of the table. You see that now in chapter 9. He put him at the head of the table, invited about 30 guests, and served him the best portion of the meat. And you can tell that Samuel had that reserved for him because he actually sent for it. And you find that Samuel was impressed with Saul. You see that in chapter 10. He was impressed with Saul, and he took the flask of olive oil and he poured it on Saul's head and kissed him. And here you have the king being anointed, and that was something. And the thing is about it is why I said that Samuel is not called a priest in the Bible, which is strange because he was doing priestly duties. Anointing was done by a priest. Those were the people who anointed others. So Samuel anointing. Anybody know the song Zadok the Priest?
No.
There's a music where it talks about Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet, they anointed Solomon king, and you will see that when you read about Solomon.
That's in the second Samuel.
Correct. So Samuel, just like if you watched the coronation of King Charles last year or whenever it was last year, you would have seen the Archbishop of Canterbury who anointed King. Well, you didn't saw it because they had a screen around it, but that's what was happening. Where's Iris when I need her?
No, I know. No, it didn't happen last year. It was the year before.
Time flies.
It doesn't matter. Well, yeah, I think it was last year. But regardless, you would have seen, the Archbishop of Canterbury is who anointed King Charles, because it was a priestly duty that was done when a king was being anointed.
To anoint the breast, isn't it? Anoint the chest.
He anoints that from the head down. You know, the head is anointed. Like you saw here in this, where flask of olive oil was poured on his head. It is usually on your head. The same way too, when you're ordained a priest, the bishop anoints priests as well. Priests were anointed when they're being ordained. I don't know if they do it here in the States. I think they do in some dioceses, I don't know all, but they can either anoint you in your hand, in the palm of your hand, or they will anoint you on your forehead and your hand. When you're being ordained a priest. Okay, let's see what else I want to talk on. And so you find here that and what you're going to see now is when we go out of chapter 10, Saul is looking good as a king. He wins a battle. He fights the city. He rescues the city of Jabesh. He wins that war. He feels good about himself. People feel good about him. And so he's confirmed as king, because remember, there were some who did not think that he could save them, and they were not interested. They were so not interested that they didn't even give him any gifts. They despised him and they did not bring him any gifts. You see that at the ending of chapter 10. But he goes out, he wins a battle, he's victorious. And then you find then in verse 11 and verses 12 in chapter 11, verses 12 to 15, they proclaim him king. And is it there where you see, where is it that they say, long live the king? But they said, long live the king as well. Why am I not see where I wrote that note? Oh, yes, that was in chapter 10, verse 24. Chapter 10, verse 24. But then when we come now to Samuel's farewell speech in chapter 12, you find that Samuel in his speech, he publicly defends his own integrity. And he does this, and he says to people, if you look at chapter 12, and verse 3, he says, "Here I stand, testify against me in the presence of the Lord and his anointed. Whose ox have I taken? Whose donkey have I taken? Whom have I cheated? Whom have I oppressed? From whose hand have I accepted a bribe to make me shut my eyes? If I have done any of these things, I will make it right." "You have not cheated or oppressed us," they replied. "You have not taken anything from anyone's hands." And then Samuel said to them, "The Lord is witness against you, and also his anointed. This is witness his day, that you have not found anything in my hand." And so as he knows that his time is ending, that obviously now Saul is the one who's in charge, he wants to make sure that he has done his work faithfully, and that there's no and that he has done it with integrity. But he also, what is interesting is, but he also reminded the people that they need to respect their king, they need to obey him, and the king himself need to obey, that they need to respect their king, they need to obey God and what God has put there. But he also says the king also needs to obey God. If you read from verse, you read, that is true. That is true, Bryce. He says from verse 13 of chapter 12, "Now here is the king you have chosen, the one you asked for. See, the Lord has set a king over you. If you fear the Lord and serve and obey him and do not rebel against his commands, and if both you and the king who reigns over you follow the Lord your God, good. But if you do not obey the Lord, and if you rebel against his commands, his hand will be against you as it was against your ancestors." So even although you have your own king, don't think you can do what you like. Because if your king and you do not respect and obey God, the same thing can happen as if you had no king. When you go into battle, you will still lose. And so Samuel wanted to get that point across to them, that it's not just, okay, you have a king and the king can do as he likes. No, the king still has to obey God. And you too,
Yeah,
as
but
the people,
yeah,
have
but
to
Saul
obey
didn't
God.
obey God. That's the problem. However,
Well,
in chapter
yes, he
13
didn't. He
through
didn't in
15.
the end, but you have to obey God in order for it to be working in sync and working well. And then we find that Samuel, where is it? Is it at the end of verse 12, chapter 12? Let me see quickly. I'm trying to see. Okay. I don't see it there. So it probably is chapter 13, where you see that Saul was 30 years old when he becomes king. He reigns for 42 years. And also now you see Jonathan, his son, is getting into the action. He's becoming like the son who goes off. He's the king's son. He can do whatever he likes, and he goes off and he does stuff that the king doesn't even know about, and he should probably not have been doing either. And it caused, when Saul attacked the Philistine outpost,
Beginning of 13.
chapter 13, yes, chapter 13. You see there then that Saul, the troops, let me see, where am I
Jonathan
reading?
attacked the Philistine outpost.
Yes, he attacked he attacked the Philistines. The Philistines assembled to fight Israel, and they lost. They retreated. The Israelites retreated. And when they retreated, obviously Saul realized that something went wrong. And when he found out, he realized that Jonathan had something to do with it. But there was something else I was looking for before that, because that happened, I think, in chapter 14. Oh, yes. Well, this is what I was looking for. In chapter 13, you will remember that Samuel told Saul that he was going to meet him at Gilgal, and in 7 days, I think it was, and because to make an offering to God, and because Samuel got there just a tiny bit late, Saul went ahead and did it himself. And that was a disobedience. That was his downfall, because God wanted Samuel to do it. Instead, Saul decided to do it. And when Samuel turned up, Samuel said, as you see in verse 11 of chapter 13, "What have you done?" asked Samuel. Saul replied, "When I saw that the men were scattering and that you did not come at the set time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Michmash, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the Lord's favor. So I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." And Samuel said, "You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over Israel for all time. But now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart and appointed him ruler of his people, because you have not kept the Lord's command." And this obviously puts a sourness into Saul's mouth, because Saul is going to beg Samuel to go back with him so he doesn't look like a failure, and he had to beseech Samuel. You'll see that eventually, that he had to beseech Samuel to go with him, and he ultimately goes, although he said that he would not. But at this time, Saul is now being rejected as king. All right, and that God has lost favor with Saul. I think we have covered a lot, the majority of it, and you would also find, as I was talking about Jonathan, we know that Jonathan went fighting a battle with
Yeah, you said that in chapter 14, Father.
yeah, in chapter 14, he went fighting the battle, they lost, and even Saul said, you know, may God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if you do not die, Jonathan. But the men supported Jonathan, and he did not die. But Saul was willing for his own son to die.
But he did not.
But he did not.
Yeah,
not
he doesn't
because
die
of-
until
yeah,
later on.
Yes, he
Saul
does.
doesn't die until later on either.
Yeah. Well, the two of them die in the same battle.
Yeah, but
later
like
on.
later on.
Later on, yes, they do. Later on.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Yes, they don't. They Saul. You see, the thing is about it is that although Eli dies, and although not Eli, sorry, although Samuel dies, and Samuel, we haven't got to
yeah,
the
but
point
Samuel
where
dies of old age.
but
doesn't get killed in
when you
battle.
get to chapter 16, you'll see that Samuel is going to anoint David as king. But although he anoints David as king, Saul is still king. But
Right, and then
but
Saul
Saul
kills
will,
Jesse
but Saul,
and all the
but
other
Saul
people.
will, but Saul, hold on a minute, Bryce. But Saul will eventually die, and David then will take over. But by then, Samuel has already died.
Yes. Yeah, Samuel dies of old age. Samuel also kills Aga. He killed
Yes,
because
he
he got
kills
mad at Saul.
Aga. He kills Aga, which was another disobedience on the part of Saul, where he was meant to kill all the Amalekites.
Right, and then he shows him the head after he
and-
beheads him.
and he chose to not to spare Agag's life. And then and also what he did was he got rid of all the poor and the not so good livestock and crops and all of that for the Amalekites, but he kept the good stuff, the best stuff, the healthy stuff. And he was not supposed to do that. He was to the command was to destroy everything, but instead of doing that, he kept the good stuff. And he said, when Samuel asked him, well, what have you done here? He told Samuel, oh, I was keeping the good stuff for the Lord. You could almost see that it was, he was trying to find a way out
So
of
he
it.
disobeyed the Lord, you're saying?
Yes, he did. He disobeyed the Lord because he was not supposed to do that. And
Is that why he gets
so much so that Samuel said to him, you know, which you think the Lord prefers, you're making an offering to God, or you're obeying him. And and obviously it was obedience take precedence over making a sacrifice.
Yeah, but also
offering.
David does bad things as well too later in life when he becomes king.
Yes, he does. But the difference is, though, I will say this: the difference is that whereas Saul is seen as one of the bad kings of Israel, David is not. Even despite of David's limitations and his weaknesses, what he did,
Even though he killed Uriah and everything else.
Even although he did that, he is still seen as probably the best king of Israel. Yes,
how could he be a best king if he does so many bad things to God? Anyway?
Well, it just shows that the rest did even worse things. that's all it shows.
So you're saying God actually forgives David? So you're
Huh?
saying God actually forgives David?
The thing is about it is that God, yes, he did forgive David, but it isn't the thing of. But you also have to remember too that Jesus comes from that lineage
Yes,
as well.
of course he did.
He comes from that
blessed
lineage.
his line.
Yes, that is his line. That's Jesus's line. David, you know, that is his line from the lineage of King David. But as I said, and that's why too that he would have been seen as probably, if not, and I think in the Bible he's seen as the best king of Israel. And Israel had good kings and bad kings. There were good kings and bad kings throughout. But yes, he did.
All right.
In summary, I would just want to say that Samuel, first I'm going to send you a couple of handouts. I'll email them to you. But Samuel is seen as the transitioner between Israel being ruled by judges to Israel going toward monarchy, and you will see that Samuel would anoint 2 kings, as I said previously. So he brought up the tail end of the judges, and he did prophecy. He was a prophet. He's seen as one of the first prophets, one of the best prophets. The other prophet that will probably supersede him, if you want to talk about pecking order of prophets, will be Elijah. But he's seen as a good prophet. He's seen as a judge. He judged Israel from his home in.
We can't hear you
just a
again.
few
You
north,
froze for that.
which are you hearing me, everybody?
Yeah, we're hearing you now.
Yeah.
Oh,
we-
okay.
Yeah, you froze. for
Which
that,
was
but it's fine.
a few miles north of Jerusalem. He, as I said, he was never called a priest, but he offered sacrifices. He conducted worship at the shrine in Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was kept before it was captured by the Philistines. He was also called a seer, or could be seen as a seer. You might see that name in some of your translations, depending on what translation you have. And simply what that meant, that he was a man who he was not a fortune teller, but he can foresee the future based from the past and the present. But he could also perceive things that were spiritual, which other people were unable to see. So he could perceive or see things that were spiritual. He was an interpreter of eternal truth. He had that deep faith to be seen in that light. He was seen as a man of prayer, of deep faith, and one who can intercede on behalf of the Lord, because the Lord used to speak through him since he was a prophet, and tell him what was going on. So Samuel, when you compare Samuel to Samson of last week, where there were both Nazarites, where there were both judges, where there were both men chosen by God. You would have seen it, I didn't point it out in this, but you will see that the Holy Spirit was on Samuel. You saw that the Spirit was on Saul as well, as he became king, which goes back to what I was saying previously, that in the Old Testament, the Holy Spirit descends on people when they're called to do certain tasks on behalf of God. So the Spirit was on this man, and he was a good man, a holy man. Any questions?
All right.
Yeah, I have a question. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Juanita. Yeah, go ahead.
It's not so much about Samuel, but I can't remember which chapter it was in.
Mhm.
But there was a point where I got the impression Samuel was praying for Saul or somebody. And the Lord said, why you continue to pray for me for this person? Pray to me for this person. Say, although you know I've rejected them, or words to that effect.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
That troubled me a little, right? And I know that God is God. But my question is, we are told about God being a loving God, a merciful God, all those kinds of things. And maybe also know that it could be a consuming fire too. And I understand the point about obedience. But today now, you say today as you are a priest, right? And as a priest in today's world, you pray for people. Is it possible that in today's world you might be praying for somebody, but God has rejected that person? So you're praying and you don't know that that person has been rejected, and your prayer wouldn't mean anything? Or is it possible that a priest today could be praying for somebody, but that priest knows within himself that is it going to work because God is rejecting that person? Just curious.
I don't think that a priest today can decipher who God reject or don't reject. I really cannot say that. That's left up between God and that person, not the priest. I mean, I don't know how else to answer that, but I can't see that I am praying for some person. Now, let me ask you, I mean, I'll say this to you. Now, if you say to me, could a priest go and pray for a person who is ill, and God already knows that they're going to let a prayer for healing that the person will live, but God already knows that the person is going to die, I can say to you, but you know that healing is also a part, death is a part of healing as well. And we, we may pray for healing to live still on this earth, but that may not be what God thinks is best. And God could be, and therefore your prayer of healing should be one in which you pray that this person will have eternal life, more or less, so to speak. Like, for example, you go and you pray for someone who's already dying. You ask for healing for that person, that God's will be done. Now, does that mean that the person still cannot come back and be well on earth? Of course they can, but you let God's will be done in that person's life. But I cannot say to you, that my prayer will be wasted. My prayer, I don't think that. For me, I never think prayer is wasted.
Okay.
I don't. Even if it is not what you wanted, I never see prayer as being wasted.
It's not a transaction.
Huh?
It's not a transaction.
Yes.
Yeah,
it
it's
is
not a transaction.
Yeah.
But okay, I understand earlier.
No,
That was a good question, Juanita.
I can't
Wait,
help,
hold on a minute,
right?
Bryce.
I can't help but as I read some things in these chapters you gave us to read, I cannot help but ask myself things from the way we are taught to see God, right? As a father, faithful, loving, all these things. And there was a point where when Saul did not do exactly as God says, and he carried back the king Agag or
Agag,
something,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And the priests or the prophet Samuel
Had him
actually
killed.
killed the man
Had him killed. Yes.
Right, because God, I guess he was doing what he think God wanted, but I'm still at the same time wondering. Then in our dispensation, the time we live in now, and the way priests preach to us in churches now, and the teachings that Jesus gave when he came, he came to say he came to fulfill the law, and it was about the heart, matters of the heart, and so on, rather than the law. Yet, then these things that were happening then, we wouldn't find God behaving this kind of way in today's world.
The question that you're getting at, I think, is you have to ask yourself, does God still punish disobedience? That is the question at the heart of the matter. Are we a people who can disobey God and get away with it? And it begs the other question: if you are a parent, do you let your children be disobedient and get away with it? And there's then there could be multiple answers to these questions. I mean, even in what we read, even in this book today, even when Saul was still begging Samuel to go back with him and to make the offering, and he was so sorry that he disobeyed God, Samuel said to him, yes, you did, but you're going to still get punished. And the thing is about it is that sometimes, yes, God will forgive, and I believe he does. That does not mean that if you disobey, there's not some kind of a consequence in some cases, which I think still happens. We may not like it, but it's what still happens. Not that God could not say, okay, I will wash you clean or whatever, but it happens. And then there are those who don't ask for forgiveness and who disobey, and there's consequences as a result. So there's a whole gamut of possibilities in terms of how God may respond to us, and it also determines the way that we respond to God as well. And that is important. I think it is a situation where oftentimes we think that some people don't like me to say this, but you think you can do whatever you feel like doing, and then as I said in my sermon the other day, last Sunday, is if God is not willing to bless what we want, we want God to step away, get out of the way, so that we could do it our own way. But yes, I will say to you is that when we read the Old Testament versus the New Testament, God is a really jealous God in the Old Testament. There's no doubt about that. He says it himself, that he's a jealous God.
Dude, violent.
Violent God. He's a very jealous God, and he expects a level of disobedience from his people, a level of obedience from his people. Mind you, his people were very disobedient as well. They were very disobedient people. So I don't know if I've answered your question, Juanita, but I know there's a struggle. I know there is a struggle, and I have that struggle. I have that struggle too. And don't think I don't. I have that struggle with the God of the Old Testament versus the God of the New Testament. What is reassuring is that the God in the New Testament is the God who Jesus presents, and who Jesus says is that the two greatest commandments is love God and love your neighbor. And the focus is on love. Mind you, you also have to realize that many people, many people are still not living up to those two commandments, loving God and loving our neighbor as we love ourselves. And that's why many a time I say to myself, I'll let you speak, George. Many a time I say to myself, and I say to others, the way how the world is going tells you very much how much love there is in the world. There's not a whole lot of it. Yes, George.
Without being disrespectful, no one is living up to loving God and loving their neighbor perfectly.
Correct. You're correct. You're not disrespecting no one. That's the truth. So, Pam is saying something I don't know because she's on mute, so I didn't hear what Pam's saying. But go ahead, George.
So, we all judge other people's sins as worse than ours.
Oh, yes, we do.
So, it's just human nature.
Correct.
We want God to give us a pass, and we want him to punish other people.
Correct. Very true. Very true.
And in the Old Testament, it seems like God is more active in the world than he is today. Correct. In terms of direct action.
Correct. That is true, and because again, that is now is because it isn't the Creator as he was in the although the Spirit was very much at moving then too, in the Old Testament.
At least
But,
in our
but at least, whereas in today's world, we have just more so the Spirit, there is a presence of the Father there as well as the Spirit in the Old Testament. So very good, George. Susan, you had something to say?
Oh, I just like your summary of Samuel and what you just said with Juanita's question too. Sometimes you don't know what God wants you to do. I mean, other than the respect other people and don't kill it. Sometimes you're not sure what path God wants you to take. So you might be making a mistake and it will show up eventually.
Yes. But as I said, as George was saying, and it is very true, we will never be able to perfect the love that God expects from us for him and for others. But does that mean that we throw up our hands in the air and say, okay, well, we can't make it, let's do nothing about it? Of course not. You have to.
No.
You work toward it. You work at trying to achieve it. You will fall short, but you still try to achieve it. You try to get better each and every day. Paul tells us before we used to be like babes on baby food. We are supposed to be getting towards solid food, and each day you get more and more solid food, and that's how we're supposed. So even although we will never get to perfection, we are to strive toward it, realizing that we will fall short because of who we are. We are human beings who have frailties and limitations and weaknesses and born in sin and all that good stuff or bad stuff, and we will never get to the point of perfection. But that does not mean that we're to say that we're not going to try. And we are meant to try. That's why we go to church. That's why we want to hear God's word, because we are meant to try. We are meant to try.
For sure.
And try real hard so that we make improvement. All right. I think next week is who? I think it's now David and Solomon, I think.
Yes, it is.
I think next week is David and Solomon. So I'll send you those as early as possible. If there's a lot of chapters, I'm not sure what they are, so that you can read up on them. But read. Try to spend some time reading them, because once you spend the time reading them, you get a real more feeling for the story. And even if you have not finished reading for today's class, still finish reading those chapters, because you get a holistic picture of the whole thing. And it's interesting reading, really interesting.
Thank you, Father.
Thank
Have
you,
a good night.
All right. Have a good night, Pam. Thank you so much. And have a good night, everyone.
Over
Have a
and
good night.
out.
Thank you.
All right. God bless.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Karen.